I turned 18 on a gray morning that smelled like burnt toast and old resentment. I remember standing at the foot of the kitchen table, still half asleep, when Richard, the man who raised me, the man I used to call Dad, reached into his wallet with the reluctance of someone unwrapping a bill that they already regretted touching. He didn't say happy birthday. He didn't even look at me. He just flicked a $50 bill in my direction like it offended him to hold it a second longer. The bill floated in the air for a moment, then slapped against my arm and drifted to the floor. Richard finally looked at me then, just long enough for me to see the cold certainty in his eyes. "We're done," he said. "I've paid enough for someone else's mistake." Someone else's mistake. He'd waited 18 years to say that. Years of muttered insults, missing events, strategic silences, and calculated indifference. Years of pretending I was invisible whenever Tyler was around. Years of expecting me to understand the unspoken rule I wasn't his. When he told me to get out, I didn't argue. I didn't cry. The truth was, I'd been waiting to leave for a long time, but not like this. I had imagined leaving on my own terms. Not being thrown into the world with $50 and a lifetime of unanswered questions. But before you understand how that moment became the spark for everything that followed, you need the history, the proof that this wasn't some sudden explosion. It was the final crack in a foundation that had been splitting since I was a child. I was 8 the first time the imbalance became too obvious to ignore. It was the afternoon of my piano recital at Highlands Ranch Elementary. I had practiced Beethoven's Für Elise so many times that the melody played in my head even in silence. My mother, Linda, sat in the front row in her blue dress, the one she saved for special occasions. She held her phone up to record every moment. The seat next to her remained empty. After the show, I asked where Richard was. "Last-minute meeting," she said. But I was 8, not naive. He never had last-minute meetings when Tyler had soccer. My brother was 4 then, and spent half his games picking dandelions instead of playing, but Richard attended every single one as if Tyler were destined for the World Cup. That night, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. "Every time I look at her, I see the mistake you made," Richard hissed. "She's a child," my mother whispered back. "She didn't ask for this. She's not mine. And the second she's 18, she's gone." I didn't fully understand what mistake meant at the time. But I understood the tears in my mother's eyes the next morning. I understood the way Richard refused to meet my gaze for days. And I understood that whatever I was, it wasn't wanted. And now, on my 18th birthday, the truth he'd hidden for years finally erupted. But what Richard didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that throwing me out was the beginning of a revelation that would unravel his entire life. By the time I was 16, the difference between the way Richard treated Tyler and the way he treated me wasn't just emotional, it was financial. Tangible. Measurable. There were receipts that painted the truth clearer than any argument could. It was September of my junior year, the season when every student suddenly panicked about SAT prep and college planning. The registration deadline was 2 weeks away, and I needed $200, $150 for the test itself, $50 for the prep materials. I rehearsed what I would say, making my request as minimal as possible. Richard hated any conversation that required emotional effort. He was in his home office when I found him, typing aggressively into spreadsheets like the keyboard had personally offended him. "I need money for the SAT, I said. He didn't look up. "Get a job. The deadline. Tyler needs new cleats. The good ones cost $350. I blinked. "You're buying him $350 cleats. He outgrows shoes every 6 months. Richard sighed dramatically, as if I were exhausting. "I can't be handing out money to everybody. Everybody. Meaning me. That night, I applied for jobs. The next week, I was hired at Brewed Awakening, a local coffee shop. I scrubbed counters, steamed milk, and came home smelling like espresso beans and stress for months. I worked 15 hours weekly, juggling shifts with homework and chores. It took 3 months to save enough for the test and books. Meanwhile, Tyler got a brand new iPhone every September, no discussion, no hesitation. When my SAT results came in, I printed the report and left it on the kitchen counter. A 1,480, 96th percentile, something to be proud of. No one said a word. Not Richard, not Karen, not Tyler. The silence felt louder than any insult. Mom would have celebrated with me. But she had been gone for years, taken by breast cancer when I was 12. After she passed, the house fell into a colder version of itself. Karen took over within months, rearranging closets and boxing up everything that reminded Richard of Mom. She even tried to move Mom's jewelry box to the attic. I stopped her. "That's mine," I said, clutching it hard. Richard shrugged. "Let her keep the junk." It wasn't junk. It held secrets that would change everything. Back then, though, I didn't understand the significance. I was just a teenager trying to survive in a house that treated me like a burden. I stopped asking Richard for money. I saved every penny from my job. I bought my own clothes, school supplies, toiletries. And quietly I kept track. Dates, costs, every clear example of favoritism. Not because I planned to use it, but because deep down, I knew I would need evidence someday. Evidence that I wasn't imagining anything. Evidence that I wasn't crazy. Evidence that I had been neglected long before I understood the weight of that word. And as it turns out, I was right, because 2 years later, a letter hidden in my mother's jewelry box would reveal a truth even bigger than Richard's resentment. My mother died when I was 12, but the last gift she left me didn't reach my hands until I was 16. She had been sick for 14 long, suffocating months, chemo, hospital stays, whispered conversations she thought I couldn't hear. But even near the end, she thought ahead for me. She protected me in the only way she could. 3 days before she passed, she asked a nurse for privacy. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand that had grown paper-thin. Her voice trembled, but her grip was firm when she said, "There's a letter for you in my jewelry box. The one with the roses." I nodded. I knew the box. She kept her old keepsakes in it. Pearls she never wore, a silver bracelet, a tiny childhood photo of me. "Don't open it until you're 16, she whispered. "Promise me." I didn't understand why. I didn't understand anything then. But I promised. After she died, Richard remarried within 11 months. Karen swept through the house like a storm in designer heels. She boxed up Mom's things, rearranged rooms, erased memories. When she tried to move Mom's jewelry box to storage, I held it tightly enough to bruise my palms. "That's mine," I insisted. Richard didn't care. "Let her keep it." So I hid it deep in my closet, burying it behind sweaters I never wore. For 4 years, on the morning of my 16th birthday, with the house empty and silent, I finally opened the box. Inside was a single envelope with my name written in Mom's handwriting. Hands shaking, I unfolded the letter. 3 pages, dated August 2019. And within minutes, everything I thought I knew about my life was stripped away. She wrote that Richard wasn't my biological father. Before marrying him, she'd had a brief relationship with a man named Marcus Holloway. They parted ways when he got engaged to someone else. She didn't know she was pregnant until after he left. She never told him. She married Richard and let him believe I was his. He found out the truth when I was 3. He had known for 15 years. "He stayed," she wrote. "Not because he wanted to, but because he didn't want the world knowing. And he punished us both in ways he thought were subtle. But you deserve the truth." My mother apologized for keeping it from me. She said she'd been scared of losing me, scared of what Richard might do, scared he would take me away. She also included contact information for her attorney, Eleanor Vance, who had instructions to help me if I ever needed it. "You are not a mistake," she wrote. "You are the best thing I ever did." I read her letter twice, 3 times, a dozen times. Then I opened my laptop. When I typed Marcus Holloway Denver, the search results nearly knocked the breath from me. Billionaire, CEO, a face suspiciously similar to mine. And the most shocking twist, Richard worked at a company that Marcus had co-founded. Everything suddenly made sense. Everything. But knowing who my real father was didn't scare me half as much as the question that followed. Did he want to know me? For 6 months, I did nothing. I went to school, worked my shifts at the cafe, kept my grades high, and tried not to drown under the truth sitting in my chest like a stone. I didn't know whether Marcus would want to hear from me, whether he'd deny it, whether he'd ignore me like Richard did for most of my life. So I waited until I wasn't acting out of emotion but intention. When I finally reached out, I didn't email, didn't message, didn't call. I wrote a letter, a real one, ink on paper, folded carefully, mailed to Holloway Capital Partners downtown. I included a copy of Mom's letter and asked for only one thing, an independent DNA test. I didn't ask for a relationship. I didn't ask for money. I just wanted truth. 18 days passed before a response arrived, in an envelope with a law firm seal. Marcus had agreed to the test. The appointment was at a certified lab, with both of us scheduled separately. The test itself was simple. A cheek swab. 5 minutes. Then 2 weeks of waiting that felt like walking on broken glass. On November 8th, the results came. 99.97% probability of paternity. I must have stared at the number for an hour. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. Denver area code. Is this Athena? Yes. This is Marcus Holloway. My breath halted. I received the results, he said. I didn't know about you. But now that I do, I want to make something clear. A pause. I'm not going anywhere. That was the moment my life split into before and after. 2 months later, we met in person at a cafe. He walked in wearing a charcoal coat and nerves hidden behind a businessman's composure. When our eyes met, the resemblance hit us both. Hi, he said softly. I'm Marcus. I know, I whispered. We spent 2 hours talking. About Mom. About my life. About everything he'd missed and everything I'd endured. He had questions he was afraid to ask, and I had answers I wasn't sure how to say aloud. When he asked about Richard, I hesitated, but he pressed gently. So I told him about the neglect, the financial disparities, the emotional distance, the SAT money, the phone plan, the way he treated Tyler like royalty and me like clutter. Marcus's jaw tightened with each detail. He did that knowing you weren't his? Yes. And knowing why? I nodded. He didn't raise his voice, didn't curse, but the quiet fury in his eyes was louder than shouting could ever be. Athena, he said, you deserve better, and I'm going to make sure you have better from now on. I didn't believe him fully then. Not yet, but I wanted to. And I had no idea that the day he chose to show up for me would be the same day Richard finally snapped and everything exploded. March 15th, the morning of my 18th birthday, felt strangely calm. Like the air was holding its breath. I woke before my alarm and stared at the ceiling of the room that had never felt like mine. The posters were gone, the shelves half empty. I had been preparing to leave long before today. I just hadn't expected to be thrown out. When I walked downstairs, the kitchen was its usual cold ecosystem. Karen on her phone, Tyler absorbed in cereal and his iPad, Richard hiding behind the newspaper. No happy birthday. No card. No acknowledgement. The absence was predictable, but it still stung the way a healed scar aches in the rain. Outside the window, a sleek black Mercedes was parked at the end of our street. Marcus. He was already waiting. My heart thudded. When Richard finally looked up, it was with the expression of a man about to perform a chore. He opened his wallet, pulled out a $50 bill, and tossed it in my direction without a pause. Time's up, he said. You're an adult now. Get out. Tyler froze mid-bite. Karen's eyes widened, but she said nothing. I stared at the bill on the table, then picked it up slowly. You think this is an insult? I asked. It's more than you've given me in years. His jaw tightened. Don't start. Oh, I'm not starting. I pulled a large envelope from my jacket. You are. He frowned as I slid it across the table. Open it. Inside were the DNA results. And Mom's letter. Richard skimmed it, then reread it. His face drained color inch by inch. You knew, he croaked. I've known for 2 years. I looked out the window, just as Marcus stepped out of the Mercedes and started walking up the driveway. Richard followed my gaze and choked on his breath. No, he can't. He has no right. He has every right, I said. The doorbell rang. No one moved. I'll get it, I said. I walked to the front door with steady steps. Richard sputtered behind me, trying to form words that didn't exist. I opened the door. Ready? Marcus asked gently. I nodded. Marcus walked inside with the confidence of someone who wasn't here to negotiate. He positioned himself between me and Richard. Richard, he said calmly, I'm here for my daughter, the one you just tried to discard with $50. She's not your... Marcus raised a hand. The DNA says otherwise. And so does Linda. Richard looked like he might pass out. Everything you've done to her, Marcus said quietly, has consequences. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in Richard's eyes. And I felt nothing for him. But this confrontation was only the beginning. The real reckoning, the one Richard would never recover from, was coming at the gala. Richard didn't know what to do with Marcus standing in his foyer. It was almost comical, this man who had spent 18 years posturing, criticizing, and asserting control suddenly looked like a child caught stealing. His face twitched between denial, rage, and panic, as if cycling through emotions faster than his mind could process. Karen stood frozen behind him, one hand hovering in the air. Tyler stared at us from the kitchen table, as though we'd stepped into his house from another universe. Marcus wasn't loud. He didn't puff out his chest, or snarl the way Richard did when threatened. He simply stepped forward with calm authority, the kind of composure that made silence louder than a shout. "I'm here for Athena," he said. "Your behavior this morning made the decision simple." Richard's hand curled into a fist. "She's not your daughter." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Your own hands are holding the DNA results that say otherwise. 99.97%. Hard to argue with science." Richard's lip curled. "You don't get to walk in here and—" "I'm not here to debate," Marcus cut in. "I'm here to remove her from an abusive environment." Karen's voice cracked. "Abusive?" Marcus turned, meeting her wide eyes. "Yes. Neglect, emotional manipulation, misuse of her inheritance. Would you like me to list them alphabetically?" Her face drained white. She looked at Richard as though seeing him for the first time. Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a manila folder. He placed it on the kitchen counter with deliberate weight. "These are the financial records from Linda's trust account. $47,000 withdrawn. None spent on Athena." "I had every right," Richard started. Marcus opened the folder and slid a spreadsheet toward him. "Receipts don't lie. You spent the money on your son. Soccer camps, electronics, private coaching, family vacations. Not one expense tied to Athena's needs." Tyler looked between us, eyes widening as if puzzle pieces finally clicked into place. Karen whispered, "Is that true?" Richard didn't answer. Marcus continued, "Colorado law is especially strict about trustee misappropriation. You'll be personally liable, and I'll ensure you're held accountable." Richard's voice broke into jagged pieces. "You're trying to ruin me." "You ruined yourself," Marcus replied. Then, almost casually, he pulled out the last item, a printed email. Richard's face twisted when he saw the header. "Subject: Inheritance issue. Confidential," Marcus read aloud. "You asked your lawyer how to exclude Athena from your will without explaining why. That was 6 years ago." Karen recoiled. "Richard, how could you?" Tyler whispered, "Dad?" Richard swallowed hard but said nothing. He couldn't. Finally, he jabbed a shaking finger at me. "You planned this?" "Yes," I said simply. "For 2 years, ever since I found Mom's letter." Richard's mouth opened and closed like he couldn't decide whether to scream or beg. Marcus stepped beside me. "Athena, you don't need to stay here another second." I looked around the kitchen, the cold walls, the silent judgment, the house that had never been a home. "Goodbye, Richard," I said softly. Marcus guided me out the door. As the lock clicked behind me, I felt something I had never felt in that house, freedom. But Richard wasn't going to let that be the end. He wasn't done hurting me. He was about to go after my future next. Moving into Marcus's guest apartment felt like stepping into an alternate reality, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Denver's skyline, quiet hallways, soft lighting, and an atmosphere that didn't choke me. I unpacked my life slowly, box by box, letting the silence settle around me. For a few days, I almost believed that the worst was behind me. I should have known better. Richard had always been most dangerous when cornered. The first attack came on Tuesday morning. My phone rang with a number I recognized, my high school principal. "Athena," Principal Herrera said gently, "I received a call from Mr. Mercer." My stomach tightened. "He said you've been unstable, that you fabricated a story about your family, that you may need a psychological evaluation before graduation." My breath caught. "He said what?" "I don't believe it," she said quickly. "Your teachers don't either. But I wanted you to know." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall. This wasn't a father trying to save face. This was a man trying to crush me any way he could. The second hit came 2 days later, an email from my university's financial aid office. Subject: urgent, verification required. They had received information questioning my guardianship status and the accuracy of my FAFSA application. Richard had reported me. He wasn't trying to drive me out of his house anymore. He was trying to destroy my future. I called Marcus immediately. He's trying to ruin everything. No, Marcus said evenly. He's trying to maintain control the only way he knows how, through threats. But he has no power now. It feels like he still does. He won't for long. He spoke with a confidence I didn't share, but he also spoke with a plan. Eleanor will handle the principal. And the university, he said. But I need you at the gala this weekend. The gala? The Denver Chamber Charity Gala. Richard will be there to receive an award he's chased for years. And we're going to what? Confront him. No, Marcus paused. We're going to let the truth confront him. Publicly. Honestly. Irrefutably. I swallowed. That sounds like war. It's not war, Marcus said. It's justice. On Friday, he sent a long garment box to my apartment. Inside was a navy gown. Elegant. Simple. Perfect. A birthday gift, he said. Not payment. Not pity. Saturday night, as I stepped through the golden doors of the Four Seasons ballroom, I clung to that thought. Marcus walked beside me, steady, composed. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Live music floated through conversations. And in the crowd near the bar I saw him. Richard, dressed in a tux, champagne in hand, laughing like his life wasn't crumbling. Until he saw me. His smile died. His face drained. He excused himself abruptly, shouldering through the crowd to reach us, rage twisting his expression. What the hell are you doing here? He was shaking. I wasn't, because before Richard could humiliate me, he was about to humiliate himself in front of 400 people. Richard's anger pulsed off him like heat from a furnace. Guests nearby pretended not to stare but failed miserably. This was the kind of scandal people remembered for years. He stopped inches from me, his voice barely controlled. You have no right to be here, he hissed. This is my night. I was invited, I said calmly, by the event's lead sponsor. Marcus rested a steady hand on my shoulder. Richard's face contorted. He's not your father. Several guests gasped. Phones discreetly lifted. People edged closer, pretending to sip champagne while hanging on to every word. She's not my daughter, Richard blurted. She's the result of Linda's affair. A charity case I was forced to raise. The room froze. Even the string quartet stopped playing. Karen hurried toward him, whispering frantically, Richard, stop. But he wouldn't stop. She's been lying, manipulating, pretending to be the victim. Just like her mother. He shot a bitter glare at me. You won't embarrass me here. You're doing that yourself, I replied quietly. Richard wasn't listening. He was unraveling. She's a mistake, he continued louder. A reminder of everything wrong in my life. Marcus stepped forward. That's enough. Richard scoffed. This is exactly what you wanted. You've been trying to destroy me for years. Marcus tilted his head. You've done that on your own. Before the argument could escalate, the event host stepped onto the stage and tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please welcome our keynote sponsor, Mr. Marcus Holloway. Applause filled the ballroom like a tidal wave. Richard stood paralyzed as Marcus released my shoulder and walked toward the stage. Guests whispered, turning toward me with dawning realization. They were putting pieces together, and Richard could see it. He stumbled back to his table, Karen trailing behind him with a mortified expression. Marcus reached the podium, thanked the crowd, and began speaking about the charity. Then his tone shifted. Tonight, I want to talk about truth, he said. About family. About the impact our choices have on the people we claim to care for. People leaned in, sensing where this was going. 6 months ago, I received a letter from a young woman who'd been denied, dismissed, and mistreated in her own home. A young woman who only wanted to know where she came from. My heart pounded. That young woman is here tonight, and she is my daughter. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, shocked whispers. Marcus extended his hand toward me. Athena, would you join me? It felt like time slowed as I crossed the room, climbed the stage, and stood beside him beneath the bright lights. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "She grew up without the support she deserved," he said, voice heavy with controlled anger. "She paid for her own education, her own necessities, because the man responsible for raising her refused." All eyes shifted to Richard. He looked like a man drowning. "Athena," Marcus said softly into the mic, "you were never a mistake." The applause thundered. But the most devastating blow didn't come from Marcus. It came from the woman who stepped forward next, holding the documents Richard feared most. When the applause finally softened, Marcus turned toward the right side of the stage and gestured for someone to join us. A tall woman in a charcoal gray suit strode forward, confident, composed, with the unmistakable authority of someone used to commanding rooms. Eleanor Vance, my mother's attorney, the keeper of every truth Richard prayed would stay buried. The crowd hushed as she approached the podium. "Good evening," she began. "My name is Eleanor Vance, and I have been the custodian of the documentation Linda Anderson entrusted before her passing." She lifted a folder. "I hold a notarized letter written by Linda Anderson confirming that Mr. Holloway is Athena's biological father. I also hold certified DNA test results establishing a 99.97% match." A wave of whispers crashed through the audience. But Eleanor wasn't done. "In addition," she continued, "I have detailed financial records documenting the misappropriation of Athena's inheritance by her legal guardian, Richard Mercer." Richard shot to his feet. "This is outrageous." Eleanor didn't flinch. "Mr. Mercer withdrew $47,000 from a trust account meant solely for Athena's benefit. None of it was used for her care, education, or well-being." A guest near Richard's table muttered, "That's theft." Another whispered, "He's finished." Richard's face flushed red as he struggled to speak. "She's lying. They're lying." Eleanor opened the folder again. "I also possess an email written by Mr. Mercer to his attorney 6 years ago, asking how to legally exclude Athena from his will without explaining why." Karen covered her mouth. Tyler looked horrified. Every person at their table inched away. Richard staggered, then pointed a trembling finger toward me. This is a setup. Marcus has been plotting against me for years." "Richard," Marcus said calmly, "you called my daughter a mistake in front of hundreds of witnesses. You exposed yourself before I said a word." Laughter drifted through the audience. Richard stomped forward. "You don't get to ruin my life." Eleanor lifted a brow. "Your actions ruined your life, Mr. Mercer. And legal proceedings will begin Monday morning." Richard turned toward the exit, but a voice from the crowd shouted, "Running away won't help you, Mercer." He stopped, chest heaving, face contorted with shame. Karen finally grabbed his arm. "Richard, please. Let's just leave." This time he didn't fight her. He let her drag him out a side door, collapsing under the weight of his own destruction. The ballroom buzzed with disbelief. I stood frozen, my pulse pounding as the truth of what had just happened settled around me. The man who had made my childhood miserable was finally exposed. Fully, publicly, irrevocably. Eleanor gave me a small nod as she stepped down. "Your mother would be proud." Marcus pulled me into a side embrace, not possessive, not performative. Just present. Just there. For the first time, I felt it. I wasn't alone anymore. But exposing Richard was only the beginning. His downfall in the days that followed would be even more catastrophic. The Monday after the gala dawned bright and deceptively peaceful. But while the city carried on with its usual hum, Richard's life was beginning to crumble at a pace he couldn't stop. Eleanor filed the lawsuit early that morning. By noon, Richard's attorney had been served. By sunset, the whispers had already reached his workplace. The lawsuit was straightforward and brutal. Breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of trust funds, failure to support a minor beneficiary, demand for full repayment, interest, and legal fees. Eleanor explained everything to me from her office, a sleek space overlooking the city. "Richard has 30 days to respond," she said. "But I suspect he'll fold sooner." "Why?" "Because discovery would expose every detail of his finances," she replied. "He can't survive that." And she was right. 3 weeks later, Richard's lawyer called Marcus privately. They wanted a settlement. Immediate. Quiet. No trial. Full repayment. Interest. Legal fees. The remaining trust fund transferred to me. The total came to $200,500. I didn't go to the signing. I didn't need to hear Richard's excuses or see him swallow his pride. Eleanor told me he didn't apologize, not that I expected him to. When the funds hit my account, I stared at the number for a long time. Not because I felt rich, but because it validated something I'd always known but never been able to prove. I hadn't imagined the neglect. I hadn't exaggerated the cruelty. I hadn't deserved any of it. Later that evening, Marcus took me to dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant. The kind with candles stuck in old wine bottles and chairs that creaked when you sat down. "I want to pay for your college," he said. "All 4 years." I shook my head. "No." He blinked. "No. I need to do this myself." He leaned back, thinking. "That isn't pride, is it?" "It's survival," I said softly. "I spent my whole life proving I didn't need Richard. I don't want to depend on anyone now, not even you." Marcus didn't argue. He didn't guilt-trip. He didn't get angry. He smiled. "Then I'll support you in every other way. Advice, guidance, brunches, whatever you need." That, more than money, meant everything. And while our bond strengthened, Richard's reputation unraveled like a loose thread. First, the Denver Chamber quietly revoked his award. No announcement. No ceremony. Then a $12 million development partner pulled out of a major project, citing ethical concerns. Then the Denver Business Journal ran a story titled, "Family Scandal Topples Former Mercer Holloway Executive." Former. He'd been forced to resign. Within 2 months, Richard lost his career, his reputation, and the respect of everyone he'd once tried to impress. But I didn't celebrate his downfall. I felt something simpler. Relief. But the fallout wasn't over, not for Richard, not for Karen, and not for Tyler. The next chapter would reshape all our lives in unexpected ways. Richard's downfall didn't just destroy him, it scorched the people orbiting him. The truth has a way of radiating outward, hitting everyone who stood too close for too long. And while Richard had earned every ounce of the consequences he faced, the others, the ones who watched but never intervened, were now forced to face a version of themselves they'd avoided for years. Karen vanished almost immediately from the social landscape she polished like a gemstone. Her Instagram, once a highlight reel of tennis matches, aesthetic brunch spreads, and perfectly curated family photos, went private within a week. Shortly after, it disappeared entirely. Friends whispered that she had stopped attending her tennis club, canceled her committee meetings, and dropped out of her book club without explanation. People who had once praised her family's image now whispered behind manicured hands. None of it surprised me. Karen had spent 6 years watching me be treated like a stain on her white carpet. She wasn't innocent. Silence is its own betrayal. Maybe she hadn't been malicious, but neglect wrapped in politeness is still cruelty. Tyler, though, he complicated everything. He was 14, old enough to know right from wrong, but young enough to be shaped by the adults who raised him. He'd grown up hearing subtle digs about me, absorbing the unspoken hierarchy of our house. He believed the version of reality that Richard fed him. I never blamed him for it, not fully. 3 months after the gala, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Tyler. Got your number from Mom. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know it was that bad. I should have asked you. I'm really sorry." I read it 3 times, unsure how to feel. Anger. Relief. Sadness for the childhood neither of us truly understood. I answered, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm not ready to talk, but I appreciate your message." His reply came seconds later. "Whenever you're ready. If you ever are." I saved his number with no name attached. Maybe someday I'd be ready. Maybe not. Healing doesn't follow a script. Richard's house went on the market soon after. Too big, too expensive, too full of ghosts and shame. I never drove by. I didn't want to see what was left of the life that had shaped me through absence, more than presence. Moving to Boulder gave me the space to breathe freely for the first time. My apartment was small, creaky floors, mismatched furniture from thrift stores and community listings, but it felt like my own universe. Every mug, every blanket, every secondhand desk felt like a piece of independence I'd earned. My days filled with classes, part-time work, new friends, and a growing sense that I was building something real. Something mine. No more walking on eggshells. No more calculating my words. No more shrinking myself to avoid someone else's temper. And though the past tugged at me occasionally, its grip loosened with each month that passed. Richard had once tried to define my worth. Now I defined it myself. But even after I reclaimed my life, Richard resurfaced one last time with an email that forced me to confront the final boundary I needed to set. I was deep into my first semester at Boulder when the email arrived. The sender name didn't display at first. My phone only said one unread message. But when I opened it, the sight of his name made my stomach twist like a cold fist had grabbed it. From Richard Mercer. Subject, conversation? For a moment, I considered deleting it unread. He had taken so much from me. Time, confidence, childhood, and now that his life had collapsed, he wanted something from me again. Absolution. But closure can be a tricky thing. So I opened it. Athena, I know I have no right to contact you. But I've had time to think, and I realize we should talk. I owe you an explanation, maybe even an apology. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. Richard. No acknowledgement of specific harm. No accountability. Just a vague invitation for me to soothe his conscience. It was astonishing how predictable he was. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Eleanor Vance with a single question. Can you send a response on my behalf? She called within minutes. Of course. What would you like to say? I took a breath, slow, measured, and spoke the words I'd carried for years. She typed them into a formal letter, stamped with authority, not emotion. 3 days later, the letter went out. Mr. Mercer, Ms. Anderson acknowledges receipt of your email. She has asked that our office convey her response. You had 18 years to treat her with basic human decency. You chose not to. You used her parentage as justification for emotional neglect. You mismanaged her inheritance. You attempted to undermine her education and future. She will not be contacting you again. This is not revenge. It is a boundary. Do not attempt further communication. Vance and Associates. Reading the letter made my chest loosen, as if a knot inside me had finally been untied after years of tightening. Richard never responded. Maybe he was furious. Maybe ashamed. Maybe relieved. But his silence felt like victory, not because I'd punished him, but because I had finally freed myself from the hope that he'd ever be different. Marcus asked me one evening, during one of our monthly brunches, "Do you feel okay about it?" "Yes," I said. And I meant it. Forgiveness isn't always letting people back in. Sometimes it's letting them go. Marcus nodded with a look of quiet pride. "I'm glad you chose yourself." And I had. For the first time in my life, I had chosen my well-being over someone else's comfort. Richard had written the first chapters of my life with cruelty and omission. Now I was writing the rest, and he wasn't in them. With Richard gone for good, I could finally focus on something unfamiliar but beautiful, building a real relationship with the father who chose to stay. Building a relationship with Marcus was like learning a skill no one had ever taught me. I didn't have a blueprint. I didn't know what normal looked like. I didn't know how much to share or how much to hold back. But he never rushed me. He never forced our relationship into predefined shapes. He simply showed up, consistently, quietly, meaningfully. Every month, he visited Boulder on a Sunday morning, always arriving at exactly 10 a.m., always wearing a faint smile that softened the sharp edges of his businessman persona. We'd sit at a cafe on Pearl Street, sipping coffee, eating brunch, and slowly stitching together a bond that had 18 years of empty space to fill. Some Sundays were easy. We laughed about my accounting professor's obsession with color-coded graphs, or the time Marcus accidentally bought decaf beans for his entire office. Other Sundays were quieter, filled with pauses, glances, careful questions. "How do you summarize 18 years?" he asked once. "You don't," I replied. "You start from now." He smiled, truly smiled. I'm grateful for now. I learned small things about him. He hated cilantro. He loved jazz. He kept every birthday card he'd ever received. He never forgot a promise. He learned things about me, too. My favorite study spot. My fear of thunderstorms. My habit of humming when I concentrate. My dream of starting a real estate business one day. He didn't try to buy me huge gifts. He didn't overwhelm me with apologies. He just built trust the same way you build a structure. Slowly, intentionally, with a solid foundation. On my 19th birthday, he brought a small chocolate cake to my apartment. We sat on my squeaky couch, watching the Flatirons glow pink in the sunset. "Happy birthday, Athena," he said, his voice warm. "Thanks, Dad." The word slipped out before I could stop it. Marcus froze, not in shock, but in quiet emotion. His eyes softened, smiling even before his mouth did. "You have no idea what that means to me," he said. I did, though, because I felt it too. Later that night, he asked gently, "Would you ever want to meet your grandparents? Or the rest of the family?" "Maybe someday," I said. "I'm not ready yet." "There's no rush," he replied. "Whenever you're ready, they will be too." And for the first time, I believed something I'd never believed before. Family wasn't about blood. It was about effort, presence, choice. Marcus chose me. Every month, every conversation, every quiet moment we rebuilt. And I chose him too. But while my relationship with Marcus strengthened, my own life was shifting rapidly. New friendships, new love, and new fears about the future I was building. By the time fall semester settled into a rhythm, I felt like a completely different version of myself. Stronger, freer, more certain of who I wanted to become. My apartment in Boulder, though modest, felt like a sanctuary. The mismatched furniture, thrift store finds, and chipped mugs gave it a charm that made me feel safe. Every item in that space represented a choice I'd made, not one forced on me, not one dictated by fear. College life suited me. My business classes ignited something sharp and ambitious inside me. I loved learning about market strategies, negotiation dynamics, and entrepreneurship. For the first time in my life, knowledge felt empowering instead of intimidating. I also landed a part-time job at a local real estate office downtown. It wasn't glamorous work, answering phones, filing documents, occasionally shadowing an agent during sign-up meetings, but it gave me real-world experience. It gave me insight into an industry I hope to enter one day on my own terms. And maybe most importantly, it gave me proof that I could build a future without relying on anyone's pity or permission. As the semester unfolded, I made friends who didn't judge me based on my past. They didn't know the Mercer household. They didn't know about the gala, or the lawsuit, or the trust fund. They saw me, just me, for the first time. It felt like stepping into sunlight after years in a dimly lit room. Then there was Jake. He sat next to me in economics class, and one day he asked if I understood the homework. That question turned into study sessions, which turned into late-night conversations, which turned into something neither of us labeled but both understood. He made me laugh, a real laugh, not the tight, careful one I perfected under Richard's roof. We took things slow. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. Trauma requires caution, even with someone kind. He never pushed. He just made space for me. One night on my balcony, he asked, "Is it okay if we call this dating?" I hesitated. "I'm complicated." He smiled gently. "Everyone is. I still like you." So I said yes. Meanwhile, Marcus continued visiting monthly. Our brunch conversations grew deeper. He asked about my classes with genuine interest, not performative politeness. He encouraged my dream of starting a business one day, without offering to bankroll it. "I want to see what you build," he told me. "Your strength didn't come from me. You earned it." And for once, I believed someone when they said I was strong. Of course, healing wasn't linear. Some nights, memories of Richard's house still crept into my chest like thick smoke. Some days, I doubted whether I deserved the peace I'd finally found. But each time, I reminded myself that survival had shaped me, not defined me. I wasn't who Richard had told me I was. I wasn't who his silence had tried to sculpt me into. I was someone new, someone rebuilding, someone becoming. And then came the moment that completed my healing, the choice to close the last open door to my past and step fully into my future. Looking back, it's surprising how quietly the final chapter of my story with Richard ended. Not with shouting, not with another confrontation, not with unexpected apologies or dramatic regret. Just silence, the kind that feels like a locked door finally resting in its frame. Because the truth is, I didn't need closure from him. I needed closure from myself. The semester passed with steady momentum. I finished with strong grades, earned praise at my internship, and slowly felt the weight of my past loosen its grip. My therapist once told me that sometimes healing isn't about forgetting, it's about reclaiming the space your pain once occupied. And little by little, that space was becoming mine again. Richard never emailed again after Eleanor's letter. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing. It was as if he evaporated from my universe. I didn't know if he moved states, changed jobs, or stayed hidden under the rubble of his own ruined reputation. And truthfully, I didn't care. But healing had another part, one that surprised me. One afternoon, Tyler texted again. "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. I miss you sometimes." This time, instead of freezing, I felt open. "I'm doing better," I replied. "Thank you for asking. How are you holding up?" We talked for 20 minutes. Not about Richard. Not about the past. Just normal sibling things. School. Hobbies. Future plans. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness. It was possibility. And possibility felt good. Meanwhile, my relationship with Marcus deepened. I met more of his colleagues, learned about his philanthropic projects, watched him transform from a distant figure in a Google search into a real father. Imperfect, thoughtful, steady. On my 19th birthday, he handed me a handwritten letter. "Athena, I cannot change the years I missed, but I can be here for every year to come. You've built a life out of strength I've never seen before. You inspire me. Love, Dad." I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my desk drawer. It became one of my most valuable possessions, not because of who wrote it, but because of what it proved. That I was worthy of love, that I always had been, that my mother had been right. The more my life grew, the more the shadow of my past shrank. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't fearing who I used to be. I was choosing who I wanted to become. One evening, while studying for finals, I realized something that made me pause. Richard had shaped my life through absence. Marcus shaped it through presence. And I had shaped it through resilience. So here's what I learned. Your value is not determined by who fails to love you. Your life is not defined by who tried to silence you. Your story is yours to write, no matter who tried to hold the pen. Thank you for listening to mine. And now I want to ask you, if you were in my place, would you ever respond to Richard again? Tell me yes or no and why.